When nature's giants awaken, even the best prepared are powerless. From Alaska's frozen rivers to the Russian wilderness and the Arctic ice, these true stories reveal the brutal force of predators that rule their realms. Grizzlies smash lodges, polar bears tear through camps, and black bears strike without warning. Hunters, filmmakers, miners, and researchers all find themselves prey when instinct takes over. In the wild, one wrong sound can unleash unstoppable fury. In this video, we'll dive into 6 chilling stories of bear attacks on humans in remote wilderness areas. Watch till the end. On October 10, 2025, a cold wind swept across the dense forests of Kodiak Island, rattling the bare branches and sending thin layers of snow swirling across the frozen ground. 3 experienced hunters, Ethan, Claire, and Jackson, had set up camp near a sharp bend in a fast-flowing river, their tents tucked between tall spruce and alder trees. Snow-covered rocks marked the riverbank, and patches of ice shimmered along the water's edges. The air smelled faintly of pine, river water, and the crispness of early winter. Ethan, raised in wide-open country, had a lifelong comfort in wilderness isolation. He enjoyed long days near untamed water, scouting for fish and wildlife. Claire had grown up learning outdoor skills from older relatives and took pleasure in traveling far from roads and civilization, relishing the quiet solitude. Jackson had spent years working in rugged terrain and trusted his steady hands during demanding hunts. Together, they were experienced, self-sufficient, and confident in their preparations. They had carefully arranged their camp. 2 tents stood a few meters apart beside a line of stones, a small cooking area beneath a canvas tarp, and supplies, coolers, backpacks, and food, stored in a central open area for easy access. Their gear was sturdy and warm. Thick insulated jackets, heavy gloves, snow boots, and sleeping bags rated for sub-zero conditions. A black German shepherd named Rex accompanied them. Loyal, alert, and trained to sense danger, he patrolled the perimeter, ears twitching at every crack of ice or whisper of wind. Days earlier, residents near a small settlement along the river had reported seeing a massive Kodiak bear moving through the forest, following the salmon as they swam upriver. The hunters were aware that large wildlife roamed the area, but they trusted that careful planning, vigilance, and the cold conditions would keep most animals at a safe distance. As night fell, the hunters finished a simple meal of canned stew and coffee, cleaned up their cooking area, and secured their gear. Ethan braced the coolers against a tree. Claire folded maps and tucked them into her pack, and Jackson made sure the small fire was fully extinguished before climbing into his tent. Rex lay near the entrance, ears flicking toward the forest as he detected every subtle movement. The river's steady rush and the whispering wind through the trees created a calm rhythm, masking the tension in the frozen forest. Far beyond the camp, a massive Kodiak bear moved silently through the shadows. Its thick brown fur was flecked with snow, and its heavy paws pressed deep impressions into the icy ground with each step. Hunger and instinct drove the animal, drawing it toward the scent of food and human activity. The bear had roamed the area for days, trailing salmon and the occasional campfire smoke, and now the smell of stored meat and supplies reached it once again. The moon rose high over the ridge, illuminating the snow-covered forest floor. Without warning, the bear emerged from the edge of the trees, its enormous frame casting a looming shadow across the campsite. Rex lifted his head, growling low in his throat, sensing the danger before it fully revealed itself. Branches creaked and snapped under the bear's weight as it moved closer, guided by scent and driven by raw force. Then it struck. The massive animal charged the first tent with terrifying speed, snow exploding into the air as the canvas collapsed under its weight. Poles splintered, gear was crushed, and Ethan, nearest the impact, was pinned beneath the heavy fabric. Claire tried to shield herself, but the tent's walls twisted around her, pressing against her arms and legs. Jackson scrambled toward an edge, only to be caught by a falling pole that knocked him sideways, trapping him against the cold ground. The bear attacked the second tent almost immediately. Blankets, backpacks, and tools flew across the snow. The cooking area became its next target, with coolers smashed and food strewn in every direction. Salmon pieces, cans, and debris scattered across the riverbank, mixing with snow and ice. Rex barked and lunged, slipping on frozen patches of ground, trying desperately to reach his humans, but the bear's relentless power forced him back again and again. For minutes, the bear tore through the camp, leaving deep claw marks gouged into the snow and bent poles sticking out like broken trees. Then, with deliberate steps, it moved back across the damaged site once more, sniffing the air, pacing briefly, and finally disappearing into the forest, guided by the promise of easier prey elsewhere. Silence fell, broken only by the rush of the river and the occasional crack of a settling tree branch. Claire pressed herself free from the twisted fabric, arms scraped and trembling, while Jackson dragged himself out of the debris, every muscle aching from the struggle. Together, they staggered toward the center of the camp where Ethan lay unmoving beneath the collapsed tent. The sight of their friend's body, limbs twisted and clothing torn, sent a shiver through them. Rex circled anxiously, sniffing and whining, sensing the loss even before the humans could fully comprehend it. By morning, the once quiet riverside camp had been transformed into a scene of devastation. Coolers were overturned and smashed, backpacks shredded, and personal gear scattered across the snow. Deep paw prints led from the riverbank into the dark forest, a clear testament to the raw power that had swept through the site. Rangers later arrived, guided by Rex, and confirmed the grim details. The scene told a stark story. Even highly skilled hunters, well prepared and experienced, were vulnerable to the overwhelming strength and unpredictability of a Kodiak bear in remote Alaska. Neighbors' earlier sightings, combined with the rangers' observations of paw prints and destruction, corroborated the survivors' account. Claire and Jackson were able to recount the events, describing the suddenness of the attack, the bear's massive size, and the chaos that had unfolded in moments. The massacre at the Riverbend hunting camp served as a chilling reminder of the wilderness's dangers. It underscored the absolute dominance of apex predators in their natural habitat and the fragile boundary between human confidence and nature's raw, uncontrollable force. Though 2 lives survived to tell the story, the loss of Ethan and the destruction left an indelible mark on everyone involved, a testament to how quickly calm can turn into catastrophe in the wilds of Kodiak Island. In July 2022, in the deep valleys of northwestern Montana, a wildlife filmmaker named Lucas Riley began a long field project far from towns and roads. He had spent many years observing wild animals with careful attention, learning how to watch without influencing their movements. His love for nature had started in childhood, when he spent long hours beside quiet creeks with a small camera balanced on his knees. Now skilled and experienced, he worked with a small team of helpers who shared his goal of capturing rare moments in the wilderness. They followed him through cold mornings, wet brush, and steep ground, trusting his steady ways and patient plans. The group reached a remote region where tall pines grew tightly together and wide streams cut through the soft valley floor. The area was known for salmon runs and dense forests where powerful creatures traveled and fed. Lucas hoped to film the daily lives of the large animals that relied on these waters, especially the immense bears that stayed far from human paths. He felt a balance of excitement and unease, knowing the valley held danger as well as beauty. Before sunrise, Lucas walked toward a stream where fresh fish glided gently through the shallows. Mist rose from the water and drifted around his boots. He set his camera and tripod at the edge of a grassy bank, adjusting each piece with practiced care. His team spread out nearby, placing additional gear in suitable positions. The air carried only soft water sounds and faint calls from hidden birds. As the early light grew stronger, shadows shifted between the pines. A large shape emerged from the dim cover and stepped into the open stretch near the stream. Lucas froze as an enormous grizzly appeared, larger than any he had seen in all his years of filming. The animal's broad body dwarfed the fallen logs around it, and its wide back looked strong enough to crush branches under its weight. It moved slowly at first, letting its heavy paws sink into the soft ground before lowering its head toward the drifting salmon. The creature began scooping fish with smooth, powerful motions. Its paws slid through the water with surprising quiet, and each catch showed its practiced skill. Lucas watched with awe, feeling a blend of respect and fear as the animal fed. His team held perfectly still, doing everything possible not to interrupt the moment. The bear lifted its head occasionally, sniffing the cool air as if testing the valley for unfamiliar scents. Lucas adjusted his camera with cautious movements, determined to capture the rare sight. Then a strong wind swept down the valley. The soft ground trembled as one of the stands supporting extra equipment tipped over. A heavy bag slid against the rocks, knocking other items loose. The sudden crash shattered the morning quiet, sending a sharp echo across the stream. The massive grizzly lifted its head instantly, its breath rising in a visible cloud as it turned toward the crew with slow, deliberate steps. The animal moved with firm purpose, leaving deep prints in the soft ground as it walked away from the stream. Its wide shoulders rose and fell with each heavy breath, and its thick fur shifted like wind-swept grass. The calm morning air now felt tight and brittle as the strong creature closed the distance between the forest edge and the humans. Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on his chest as he backed away from the bank, guiding his team with steady gestures. The Grizzly's dark gaze locked onto the fallen equipment, and its powerful legs carried it across the uneven terrain with surprising speed. The overturned bags and broken stands created a scattered trail of trouble. The bear reached the loose pile first, pushing a metal case aside with one easy sweep. The case slid across the rocks and landed near the stream, splashing cold water upward. The animal pressed forward, stepping over tangled cords and crushed parts, flattening them under its weight. Lucas and his team retreated toward the thicker trees, trying to maintain a safe distance without losing sight of the powerful creature moving among their gear. Each shift of its body reminded them of the danger that filled the valley. The bear paused at a smashed camera lying half-buried in the grass. It lowered its head and sniffed the broken object before brushing it aside, leaving deep grooves in the soil. The soft ground captured wide, heavy paw prints that showed the strength behind each step. The creature lifted its head again, watching the retreating group, then turned slowly as if choosing between pursuit and withdrawal. After a tense moment, it swung its massive body away from the humans and moved back toward the dense cover beyond the stream. Lucas held his team still until the last glimpse of the grizzly disappeared among the trees. Only then did the tightness in his chest ease enough for him to breathe steadily. The gentle mist and quiet stream returned. Yet the morning no longer felt peaceful. Broken equipment lay scattered across the valley floor, showing how quickly a calm world could be shaken by the presence of such an animal. Crushed memory cards, snapped parts, and cracked lenses meant none of the rare sight had been saved on film. The group gathered near the bank, checking each person to ensure no one had been injured during the retreat. Their hands trembled, not from cold but from the intense fear that had swept through them. The ruined equipment felt like a heavy loss, yet the fact that all of them remained unharmed mattered more than any footage. Lucas studied the huge prints left behind and realized he would remember the animal's size, strength, and presence more clearly than any recording could convey. As the day brightened, the group gathered what remained of their supplies and began the long walk back toward camp. The valley looked unchanged, but they carried a new respect for the land around them. The shadows between the pines seemed deeper, and each sound held more meaning. By the time they reached their shelter, the full weight of the encounter had settled over them. They understood that the wild would always hold forces stronger than their plans, and that sometimes the greatest story came not from what they captured, but from what they survived. In July 2025, in the deep wildlands of Ussuri-Krai, Mikhail Petrov moved through the sky with a calm and steady mind. He had grown up near wide hills and long rivers, always drawn to open air and high places. As a child, he spent hours watching birds glide along rough cliffs, dreaming of one day flying on his own. Years later, he became an adventurer who traveled through remote regions and learned to use a paraglider with patient care, practicing each motion until the shifting fabric and lines felt like an extension of his own body. Friends knew him as someone who preferred quiet paths, cold winds, and wild spaces far from crowded towns. On this day, he planned a long solo flight over thick forest and broad valleys. The weather appeared calm, with soft clouds drifting overhead and light air pushing him forward. After hours of smooth travel, he prepared to land near a small clearing beside a slow river. The ground below looked safe, bordered by tall grass and green trees. He lowered himself gently and touched down with steady feet. The grass swayed around him as he folded the wide canopy into neat layers. He felt tired but satisfied, unaware of the danger waiting just beyond the trees. The nearby river held many fish, filling the air with a strong scent. The smell drifted between the pines like a thin trail, reaching the nose of a large male grizzly moving along the stream. The animal had wandered far from its usual route, driven by hunger and restless energy. The scent of fish urged it forward through dense branches and soft earth. As it moved closer to the clearing, it caught a new smell, human and unfamiliar gear, sharp and out of place in the quiet woods. While Mikhail adjusted a strap on his pack, heavy steps sounded deep within the trees. Before he could fully turn, a massive shape pushed through the shadows. A broad head, dark fur, and heavy shoulders emerged into view. The ground felt as though it trembled under the bear's weight as low sounds rose from its chest. Mikhail's breath caught as he stepped back, trying to gain distance from the threat now rushing toward him. He attempted to run across the uneven clearing, but the soft ground dragged at his feet. Roots and dips slowed him, forcing him into a stumbling pace. The bear moved faster, closing the space within seconds. With one sweeping motion, its forelimbs struck his legs. Pain surged up through him as he fell hard onto the soil. Before he could rise, powerful jaws clamped down on his shoulder, tearing through cloth and skin. Warm blood spread across his side as he pushed desperately against the crushing force. With the last strength he could gather, he rolled toward a fallen tree, hoping for even the smallest protection. He dragged himself behind the thick trunk with slow, shaking movements, while the heavy creature pressed forward. The bear's pounding steps sent dull vibrations through the ground. Mikhail felt his heart hammer in rapid bursts as he forced himself to stay low and silent. The animal moved around the trunk, searching for him with strong breaths that pushed warm air across the grass. Each second stretched long and thin, blurring into pain and fear. He pushed a hand into his pocket and found the small flare he always carried. His fingers trembled as he tried to hold it steady. The bear stepped closer, lifting and lowering its head as if testing the space for motion. With the last of his strength, Mikhail scraped the flare against the rough bark until a bright red spark burst into sharp light. A sudden glow filled the clearing, making the shadows leap and scatter across the ground. The flash startled the massive creature. It released a rough, deep sound before stepping back. The smoke and glare unsettled it, forcing it to hesitate. It circled the trunk once more before turning toward the dense forest. Branches snapped under its weight as it retreated through the trees, moving slowly at first, and then fading into the distance. For a long moment, Mikhail remained still, unable to move. The flare burned down in his shaking hand before dropping into the grass. His shoulder throbbed with waves of pain, and warm blood soaked through the torn fabric. He took slow breaths to keep himself steady. When he felt certain the danger had passed, he pulled himself from behind the fallen trunk. His legs were weak, and the uneven ground made every step uncertain, but he forced himself upright. The clearing looked calm again, yet everything felt changed. Grass lay crushed where the animal had stepped, and the soil was torn by deep marks from the struggle. His gear sat scattered across the ground, and the half-folded canopy had been tugged open by a passing breeze. The tall trees surrounding him suddenly felt heavier and more distant, reminding him of how isolated he truly was. He knew he needed help before his strength failed. The path back to his small camp felt longer than before, but he moved toward it with careful, steady steps. Each motion sent a new surge of pain through his body, yet stopping was not an option. The faint glimmer of the river guided him toward the place he hoped held safety. When he reached the camp, he sank beside a flat rock and pressed cloth tightly against his injured side. Hours passed as he waited. The sun lowered, stretching long shadows across the trees. At last, distant motor sounds reached him through the stillness. A search team arrived, drawn by the signal he had sent earlier in the day before beginning his flight. They lifted him carefully and carried him to a nearby base where he received urgent care. His wounds were deep and his energy nearly gone, yet he stayed awake long enough to understand that he would survive. In the following days, he learned how close he had come to losing everything. The vast forests of Ussuri Krai were home to strong animals that moved freely across the land, and even skilled travelers could face sudden danger without warning. The event changed him, leaving him grateful for quiet moments and reminding him how quickly calm ground could turn into a place of fear. The memory stayed with him, a clear lesson that nature carried immense beauty and immense power, and that survival depended on respect, awareness, and the will to keep moving, even when hope felt thin. In June 2024, along a quiet creek deep within remote Alaskan wilderness, far from towns or marked routes, fisherman Jason Miller walked through tall grass toward the moving water. He had spent many summers fishing in wild terrain and appreciated calm mornings shaped by cold wind, soft early light, and the steady sound of rushing currents. He had grown up close to rivers and learned how to cast, maintain his gear, and stay patient during long hours of waiting. His longtime friend, Mark Reynolds, shared the same appreciation for open land and quiet streams. The two men often planned extended trips together, hoping to catch salmon in peaceful areas rarely visited by anyone. Both men set up a simple space for their tools and supplies. Jason carried a cooler stocked with baited fish and prepared meals, placing it near the soft dirt close to the bank. The forest surrounding them was thick with moss, tall trunks, scattered fallen branches, and wide shadows stretching across the ground. Birds shifted between branches overhead, and the stream maintained a steady rhythm that made the entire place feel calm and sheltered. Mark moved upstream to search for spots where salmon might gather. Jason stayed near the cooler, relaxing for a moment as he checked his line. Neither man noticed that deep inside the woods, a hungry black bear had begun to move toward the creek. Food had been scarce that season, and the strong scent from the cooler reached the animal easily. Slow, deliberate steps carried the bear forward through brush and ferns, its body hidden beneath layers of leaves and thick cover. Jason crouched to adjust his bait, unaware of anything approaching. Mark, farther up the creek, turned when he heard a sudden shift of branches behind his friend. His chest tightened as he saw a large shape break through the green wall of trees. The bear moved quickly, crossing the short distance between the forest and the bank in a matter of seconds. The sudden rush shattered all calm. Jason tried to stand, but the bear reached him with a powerful charge, knocking him off balance and forcing him into the ground. Mark felt frozen as he watched his friend struggle to move away. The bear remained focused on Jason, driven by hunger and the scent coming from the cooler beside him. Mark grabbed a flare from his pack, his hands unsteady as he ran toward the scene. The creek roared on as the moment blurred into panic. Mark pushed forward and raised the lit flare high, hoping the bright spark and sharp smoke would drive the bear off. The flames hissed in the cool air, while the animal shifted its weight, still locked onto Jason with full attention. For several long minutes, nothing changed. The bear stayed close, moving only when the flare came too near. At last, the animal turned toward the deeper forest, stepping back into the shadows and brush until its form disappeared completely. Mark dropped to his knees beside Jason, the sound of the creek filling the quiet as the terrible moment settled over the lonely stretch of wilderness. He remained beside his friend, feeling the cold ground press into his legs as he tried to steady his breathing. The creek continued flowing past them, quiet yet strong, as though unaware of what had occurred at its edge. The tall trees around the clearing stood unmoving, and the ferns swayed only with the faint wind. Mark placed his hands on the wet earth, attempting to calm his shaking limbs while he looked at Jason. The moment felt heavy and unreal, like a long event that refused to fade. The forest seemed larger now, wider, darker, and every shape appeared uncertain. Mark felt weak with fear, yet he forced himself to stand. He studied the tree line again, watching the path where the animal had gone, searching for any hint of movement. The area remained silent, though the silence did little to ease the tension inside him. The scattered cooler, overturned gear, and snapped branches created a scene that looked nothing like the peaceful place they had chosen just hours earlier. Mark knew he needed help immediately. He moved toward his pack and grabbed the small emergency device he always carried for long trips. His hands trembled as he pressed the button designed to send a distress signal. A faint light blinked, confirming that the call for assistance had begun. Even so, Mark understood that help would not arrive quickly. The nearest team would need to cross rough land, navigate uneven ground, and locate his exact position. He returned to Jason and stayed close, hoping his friend might remain conscious. But the minutes dragged on. Mark felt dread settle more deeply into his chest. He repeatedly scanned the thick cover around them, worried the bear might return. The scent of disturbed soil mixed with the usual forest smells, creating an uneasy atmosphere. Mist drifted above the water, making the opposite bank difficult to see. Time passed slowly. At last, Mark heard the faint hum of an aircraft carried by distant wind. The sound grew louder little by little. He stood and waved his arms in wide arcs, hoping the team would spot him. Soon, rescuers reached the clearing near the creek. They approached with careful steps, maneuvering around fallen branches and scattered equipment. They assessed the scene quickly before kneeling beside Jason. Their expressions grew somber as they worked. Mark watched anxiously, hoping for even a small sign of improvement, but none came. The team lifted Jason onto a stretcher, covering him gently before carrying him toward the aircraft waiting in the clearing. Mark followed slowly, each step feeling heavy. The once peaceful creek now seemed distant, its calm replaced by lingering fear and deep sadness. The tall trees, thick brush, and quiet air all felt changed, as though they carried the memory of what had taken place. When the aircraft lifted into the sky, Mark remained standing in the clearing for a long moment. The soft wind touched his back as he looked toward the forest trail. He knew he would never forget the sound of fast steps in the brush, or the sudden shock that transformed a simple fishing trip into tragedy. In the days that followed, officials inspected the area, studying the tracks and damaged items left behind. They reminded visitors that wild landscapes can shift instantly when food scents draw animals from hidden cover, urging people to keep supplies secured and remain alert, even in places that appear safe. Mark carried those warnings with him as he packed the last of his gear. He walked away from the creek slowly, leaving the wild land behind with a new understanding of how quickly calm can turn into danger in the remote reaches of Alaska. November 2022. Deep in a quiet Slovenian mountain range, three workers moved carefully through an old mining tunnel. Dario had grown up near small farms and knew hard labor well. He had spent many years repairing dangerous places, always calm and steady. Lena had once studied geology before choosing a life of fieldwork, and she felt at home in rocky spaces where most people felt nervous. Tomas was the youngest of the group, strong and eager, hoping the late shift would earn him extra pay. Together they had been asked to repair a collapsed area of an abandoned tunnel. Most people avoided the place, but the three of them worked without complaint, carrying tools, lamps, and small bags of food to sustain them through the long night. The air inside the old mine was cold and dry, with dust drifting down from the ceiling whenever they tapped a wall. Their lamps cast long shadows across the rough stone floor. Outside, the forest was quiet, but the workers had noticed a strange scent before entering, a heavy musk mixed with wet soil. They assumed it came from an animal wandering far from the entrance and ignored it. They carried only basic items and did not expect danger so deep in the mountains. As the group cleared loose rubble, the small amount of food they carried rested tucked in a corner. The scent slowly drifted toward the tunnel entrance, unnoticed by the workers. Hours passed, and the lamps warmed the stone just enough to intensify the smell of bread and cured meat. In the forest, a massive brown bear moved between the trees, hungry and bold. It had been searching for anything edible as winter approached, its body heavy and powerful. When the wind shifted, the scent of the packed lunches reached its nose and drew it toward the dark opening carved into the mountain. Inside, Dario examined a crack in the wall while Lena stacked tools into crates. Tomas brushed dust from a broken beam. Their quiet focus filled the tunnel, each one unaware of the silent shape moving closer. A distant growl echoed through the passage, bouncing off the stone. The workers stiffened, unsure whether the sound was real or imagined. Then the creature appeared fully, blocking the pale outdoor light behind it. The massive bear lifted its head, eyes fixed on the three figures trapped in the narrow space. The force of its growl sent dust tumbling from the ceiling. Before anyone could react, it charged forward with sudden speed, slamming its weight across the tunnel floor as rocks shifted and lamps flickered wildly. The impact marked the beginning of a terrifying rush none of them were prepared for. The heavy body surged deeper into the tunnel, and the harsh sound of claws scraping stone filled the narrow space. Dario tried to move aside, but the beast struck him with tremendous force, sending him tumbling into a pile of broken rocks. Sharp edges cut into his back as dust swirled thickly around him. The creature's paws tore through his jacket, leaving deep marks across the fabric and scratching the skin beneath. The narrow space made every movement echo, turning each second into a wave of noise and fear. Lena and Thomas scrambled toward a raised ledge along the tunnel wall. The climb was steep, and loose dirt slipped under their boots as they pulled themselves upward. Below them, the bear swung its head toward anything carrying a scent, snapping its jaws at tool bags and crates. Its strength overturned heavy wooden boxes with almost no effort. Glass and metal shattered across the floor as lamps crashed, plunging parts of the tunnel into deeper darkness. The bear smashed through supplies, pushing rubble aside with its shoulders. It found the food containers quickly, biting through plastic and cloth. In the chaos, Tomas lost his grip on the ledge, dropping to a lower spot. The creature reacted instantly, lunging upward and clamping onto his shoulder. Pain shot through him as he struggled back toward Lena, the two of them pulling together until he was out of reach again. For long minutes, the space felt like a storm of claws, dust, and flying debris. The animal shook crates apart and sent tools skittering across the rocky floor. Its growls rolled through the tunnel until, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it retreated. The sound of heavy paws faded toward the entrance, leaving only settling dust and the sharp scent of broken wood and spilled food. When the air cleared, the workers remained still, muscles trembling from shock. Dario slowly pushed himself upright, wincing at the pain running down his back. Tomas held his wounded shoulder, breathing heavily. Lena climbed down carefully, checking the floor for danger before moving forward. The tunnel looked ruined, with overturned crates, smashed lamps, and scattered rubble marking the path of the animal's fury. Outside, the forest had grown quiet again, but the group understood that danger was far from gone. They gathered what little remained of their supplies and moved toward the exit, supporting each other over uneven rocks. Their bodies were bruised, scraped, and sore, but they were alive. Once out in the cold mountain air, they finally allowed themselves to breathe deeply. The sight of the broken tunnel entrance behind them made it clear how close they had come to disaster. The three workers knew they would never forget the moment when a hidden tunnel stopped being a shelter and became a trap, showing that even deep underground, Nature could find them and strike without warning. On January 2025, in the far northern reaches of the Arctic, 3 researchers worked on drifting sea ice under a pale sky that never rose high. Elena had grown up near cold coastlines and always felt calm around snow and wind. Her interest in birds began as a child, watching them circle above quiet beaches. Mark had studied frozen landscapes since college, drawn to wide, empty places where few people ever walked. Sophia had spent years observing how animals moved across ice and water, carrying notebooks filled with small sketches and notes. Together, they formed a small team sent to study birds crossing the Arctic sky during long migrations. Their temporary station rested on a wide sheet of ice that groaned and shifted with the ocean beneath. Wooden panels, plastic covers, and ropes held the structure in place. Crates filled with food and fuel sat just outside the entrance. The scent drifted across the ice whenever the wind shifted. Birds circled high above, but the team focused on cracks forming near distant ridges. They worked long hours checking equipment, noting movement patterns, and warming their hands near small heaters inside the station. The night of the incident was colder than usual. The wind rose swiftly, carrying sharp snow across the ice field. The sound of the storm filled the air, making it hard to hear anything beyond the flapping of loose covers. Elena stepped outside to secure a rope that had come loose, feeling the cold bite deep into her face. As she turned back toward the station, she noticed a shape moving near the far side of the crates. At first, the blowing snow obscured it, but then a heavy white outline shifted closer, revealing the source of the threat. A large polar bear circled the station, drawn by the smell of stored supplies. Its massive paws pressed deep marks into the ice, each step slow but deliberate. The wind muffled the sound of its movement, yet its presence dominated the shadows around the station. Elena hurried inside, heart pounding as the bear moved toward the wooden wall. The team braced themselves, trying to steady their breathing, but the storm outside drowned out everything. Suddenly, the bear rammed the wall with such force that panels split, sending pieces of wood and equipment flying. Mark ducked behind a crate as loose tools and boxes scattered. The station shook from the blow, bending frames and tearing ropes free. The bear swung its huge limbs through the opening, knocking over supplies and toppling a small generator. Sparks flashed across the ice as the machine landed hard. Sophia reached for a flare stick, hands trembling. A wide paw swept past her, missing by inches and scraping the floor. The sparks lit the ice as chaos unfolded, the storm outside blending with the violence inside. Holding the flare close, Sophia cast bright flashes across the ground. The bear moved slowly through the broken opening, testing each shift of the damaged frame. Its thick fur brushed against fallen crates, pushing them aside as though they were weightless. The wind outside carried snow into the station, mixing it with loose scraps of paper and splintered wood. The cold cut sharply through the room, making each breath painful. Elena crawled toward the far wall, keeping low as the bear swung its limbs through the clutter. The station floor was covered with scattered gear, making rapid movement difficult. Mark stayed behind the crate he had used for cover, gripping its edges to avoid sliding across the ice. The bear toppled another supply box, sending small metal parts rolling in all directions. Each impact sent shivers through the weakened frame, as if the structure could collapse at any moment. The flare in Sophia's hand finally sparked to life, releasing a bright red glow that illuminated the bear's wide shape. The harsh light made the animal pause for the first time since forcing its way inside. The wind carried the smell of the burning flare, and the bear stepped back slowly, shaking its head before moving toward the opening it had torn. Its large paws dug deep grooves as it exited, disappearing into the thick, drifting snow of a nearby ridge. The station was left in silence except for the groaning ice and the steady beat of the wind. Elena sat with her back against the damaged wall, trying to slow her racing heart. Mark pulled himself away from the crate, wincing at the deep marks along his arms. Sophia crouched near the broken panels, watching the storm to ensure the bear did not return. Their faces were pale, and their hands trembled from cold and fear. The floor was strewn with frozen tools, cracked wood, and spilled supplies. The small heater had stopped working when the generator fell, leaving the station colder with each passing minute. Wrapped in spare blankets, they tried to warm numb fingers and calm themselves. Elena and Mark felt sharp stings where claws had grazed them, and dark bruises were forming along their sides. By morning, the storm softened, revealing deep tracks leading toward the ridge. The team understood how close they had come to disaster. Survival in this environment depended on caution, careful planning, and respect for a land where even one mistake could bring a predator to their door.